The clan representative looked at me over the empty plate on the other side of the table. The room was filled with the wonderful aroma of fine food and delicious drinks, both non-alcoholic and nut-free, something he needed, of course. The crab-like creature in front of it focused its eyes on everything around it. We had reservations at first, but he seemed to really enjoy the food. Naturally, they always clean the dishes. Human food is very delicious. Tell me something, he said, looking at me. Of course, I answered. I was just becoming aware of the galaxy in general. Maybe you can teach me. Listen, he said, looking at the various decorations on the walls. Now that the errands are done, it's time to relax. I waved, and the waiter, a large, stocky lizard-like creature, took my empty plate. Why are these creatures human? Why do they seem to be in control of everything, he asks. Oh, they always ask that. When I said out loud, "Excuse me," he smiled and seemed offended. Beginners always wonder why humans control everything. Everything can be traced back to a single factor in their history. That's why they have all the ships. That's why they have all the planets. That's why they make all the laws. It's because of something simple. They didn't get the memo, I said and smiled. I answered with a laugh. He looked at me, confused. Satisfy your curiosity with a history lesson. Approximately 100 cycles have passed since humanity reached the galactic stage. He said he almost fell off his chair. What makes this impossible? They have huge fleets and control almost all of the world. How did this happen? In just over a century, they never got the memo, or at least chose to ignore it. Do you know the basics of space travel logistics? I asked carefully, placing my blue hand on the datapad. Of course. Do you know how hard it was to leave our hometown? He actually said it while shaking his claws. As a matter of fact, the first thing people new to the galaxy learn is that the universe is much worse than most people think. If you think about it, you can quickly see that it's not worth building huge megaships at all. Because there is no way to build it quickly, effectively, or cheaply. Just the beginning is a logistical and technical nightmare. As I looked for references on my datapad, I said, yes, we were wondering if we could build a proper spaceship as soon as possible. It was a disaster. We were unable to collect asteroids in our system. It wasn't until decades after we were properly established that we realized what kind of hell we were about to enter, and used rockets to remove resources from the Earth. We gave up and concentrated on smaller units, capsules, and exploration ships. He looked around again, and seemed to avert his gaze from me out of embarrassment. I think it was the same for us too. The more we understand the universe, the more the idea of traveling faster than light becomes a pipe dream. As we grew, huge warship fleets became increasingly impossible. The Galactic Empire's prospects began building the only large starships we could justify, turning the Ark into a large passenger ship filled with cryogenic materials and stasis facilities for a huge colony on the planet. Let's just say it quickly disappeared from my memory. I sighed with a loving smile. It took me almost 400 cycles to finally develop a decent engine that would reduce my flight time. Yet we have only colonized our innermost systems. FTL has become a distant memory. He said it in a dark tone. Of course, people didn't get the memo. They invented a system that uses gravity to fly around in space. It's a lot more complicated than it seems, and then they found a way to make it artificial, but I still said I wanted to gauge his reaction. He looked at me. Apparently, people have some sort of FTL. Yes, at first they had a pipe dream of his FTL trip. Like most of us, but unlike us, they didn't take a hammer blow to the skull. They refused to accept this, and once they figure this out, they figure out a way to use the gravity of the three gas giants as a kind of slingshot to throw themselves on. Their wormhole generators followed suit within a few decades, I said, and I showed him a schematic hologram on my datapad. They did what he just screamed in shock. Yes, FTL travels in the form of temporary gravitational wormholes. Their FTL engine uses an artificial gravity generator to create small rifts in spacetime, essentially teleporting them to their surroundings. It has its limitations, of course, but it works great. I answered with a mischievous smile. Still in shock, he said that, as far as he knows from historical archives, it's basically the same for everyone. It was always the same until people appeared in front of others. The whole civilization decided that this one hurdle of his was too difficult to overcome and just went with the flow, so to speak, he said, helpfully pointing out his pages in the archives to read. I did. We talked a little about the history of the galaxy before humans, and how the concept of FTL failed to catch on with almost every civilization in history. The empire spread across thousands of worlds, but each world had its own governments, empires, territories, and even worlds. Even within the same star system, systems can evolve very differently, and wars between the same species involve harmonic collisions and giant missiles. How entire civilizations somehow destroyed themselves because they couldn't leave their planet, or how they killed each other because they couldn't communicate properly. The only surviving civilization understood the concept of unity but also understood that if humans were separated long enough and the changes were not accepted, humanity would be one step closer to extinction. Communication still relied on remote messaging, so even with advances in technology, sending and receiving messages could take weeks. The Empire decided to try building a large warship fleet to dominate the galaxy, as it became clear that it was an unworthy logistical nightmare. Logistics continued to increase. Building a fleet, no matter how small, can take months. Once the fleet is ready, it will be sent to its death, as the target will have time to either build its own fleet or build up enough defenses to easily defeat it from the air as usual. Of course, many species are aware of the concept of briefs. Drive. You can use a type of subspace drive to quickly move around the system. The slip drive used the star system's radiation and gravity to create a passageway through spacetime, allowing FTL to travel as long as it remained within the star's gravity. Well, yes, but without that impact, a slip drive is worthless. Almost every type of room cladding has at least one slip drive variation. Its biggest drawback is that it has huge power consumption and an even bigger radar signal, making surprise attacks impossible. Yes, I know. Our slip drive is one of the best in the galaxy, he said proudly. I laughed. Everyone says that, but the people beat you. We were using the same SIP drive. We thought they were the pride of the galaxy. And we landed in the human world on a colony ship. Any pride we had disappeared when they mentioned their fleet. Okay, that still doesn't explain why humans rule the galaxy, he said, waving his claw in the air. First, let me explain a little about human history. Humanity, as a species, has 4 gas giant planets in its home system. I just opened his eyes. The fact that it sticks out from the stalk means that most star systems would be lucky to have even one of his, but 4, yes, he even has 4 quite close together, all different subspecies: Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter. Technically, there are 2 gas giants and 2 ice giants. These planets are relatively close to each other, and create their own secondary gravity. Now, in the star system, humans have discovered a way to use gravity wells to throw themselves. I tried my best to demonstrate something like a pachinko using my arms, trying not to sound childish. Well, that's impressive. What kind of abnormal world is their hometown in? Then he asked about death, the world, hurricanes, volcanoes, earthquakes, diseases, viruses, hostile native life forms, periodic atmospheric changes and polarity changes, a dead world full of death, so I said he could be heard saying he was clearly in shock. It's a kitten babbling. Yes, it's not, but apparently the dead world is the best option for producing successful species. So, like I said, humanity is on top because they didn't get the memo. The notion that giant fleets do not exist because there are no functioning humans is outlandish. I grinned. Fully conscious people would hear this, so how exactly do they control everything? After that? He asked. Well, considering our current situation. In this situation, we simply cannot care. I said that and just shrugged. Wait, never mind. Humanity came along and essentially showed us what was going on. We thought it was impossible to have a huge fleet of warships. Suddenly, people appear with battlecruisers and attack planes. I didn't think it was possible on a large scale. mining humans appear and show off their planet cracker mining ships. We believe the Empire cannot exist beyond the system due to the lack of FTL communications. Here is the arrival of humanity through the internet, I said for a while. Well, I noticed that he was starting to get bored. Sorry, I tend to talk. The problem is, humans have achieved everything we thought was fantasy, and when they invited us to join for free, all we had to do was follow the rules. There was no reason to argue. The more they spread out, the greater the awareness of the galaxy. What is the point of protecting yourself? Your rules are reasonable. By and large, we were just the worst because the law properly enforced their technical league against us. Come join us, and here we are, people in effective and complete control of the galaxy. No war, no violence, no death. They just did it, and I said, "What exactly do you get in return?" He asked curiously. Of course, there is a grace period so they can test our ability to follow the rules. We join their navy, army, and mining fleet. We have the same job, they have the same job, and it's basically exactly the same as described in old fantasy novels. Someday, we will be allowed to build our own ships and supplement our navy. That would allow us to unite our scattered empires and go on our own, or simply remain with them. My species just decided to be with them. I mean, I may not be human, but most, if not all, people call themselves tanned. I rang the little bell and called for a drink. I see, he said with interest as he looked at the terms of the service contract. So what happens if I sign this? A fleet of human warships will appear in your home system, and all other colonies you own will trade, sign up, and learn. Then, under their supervision, you will learn how to mine resources that are all yours. Then we train engineers. These engineers will serve as new recruits in the Navy. They can pass on their knowledge to others until a certain amount of time has passed. I calmly explained that, after a while, humans would use the internet to connect entire races, who would then unite under their protection. It can't be that simple. It can't be that simple. He looked nervous and said, "Oh, but that's a friend. That's really all." We were surprised when they made the same suggestion. Today, we have our own comfortable and secure vehicles, a 24-star system, and a booming economy. You are free to go alone at any time. As written in the contract, we have chosen to remain, but some have chosen to participate fully, and everyone will be brown. Other than emergency aid or wartime registration conditions, there are no catches or clauses beyond the standard ones. You might think that's essentially what I said proudly. He stood silently for a few minutes, staring at the terms and conditions and just reading the contract. Yes, it's a difficult decision. Isn't it completely against nature for an empire that rules the galaxy to so openly allow itself to recruit just about anyone within reason? It doesn't matter what type they offer. All you have to do is follow their rules, and they're perfectly reasonable. Most species would wholeheartedly agree with all of that. They are willing to make concessions in return. Again, of course, you do not agree with this. Although there are absolutes they argue with, they seem to have an unparalleled ability to reason with people. I explained that. He looked at me, then at the contract, then at me again, apparently trying to grasp reality. He screamed, reaching back with one of his claws and pinching himself. He looked around, shaking a little, then signed without saying a word, raised his glass of juice, and toasted to the future. "To a brighter future, it's me," he said in a friendly yet disappointed manner. Answered. My wine glass.